Welcome to the Teaching and Learning Conference 2015 from Ashford University. This is a discovery session for developing cognitive skills, Infographics for Caves. Moving on, hello, I am Dr. Lisa Johnson, faculty with the College of Education. My contact information is on the screen. We'll revisit that at the end of the session. If you want to write that down to follow up with me with questions afterwards or would like to explore this topic further. This video is housed on my blog at reflectivelearning.net, where you're invited to engage with me about the session content as well. Now let's get started by reviewing the outcomes from this discovery session. During this session, you're going to have an opportunity to learn how to define and distinguish infographics, and we'll also take a look at how you can recognize characteristics of an effective infographic. Those might be debated, but I'm going to present to you some of the characteristics I think matter the most. And next, recognize instructional strategies for using infographics. You'll be able to locate existing infographics, recall some technologies for creating effective infographics, and finally, hopefully you'll be excited at the end of this session and begin to plan the use of technologies, familiar and otherwise, to create infographics. Moving on, let's ask ourselves, are infographics really a new concept? Now here on the screen you probably see a couple of very familiar images of a cave painting from early human society and a stelae. And these are really important to emphasize that the use of images and text to convey information to populations is not a new concept. What makes infographics new, of course, is the digital nature as opposed to the analog nature of that information being shared. So this notion of information graphics is not really new. And in fact, if you take a look online, you can find that there are several guides for creating infographics, some dating back to the 1990s. So this is certainly not a new concept. As technologies have advanced and the recognition by everyone from journalism to business to academics of how powerful infographics can be for conveying information quickly to large numbers of people and breaking down very complex information into a simpler form for communication, infographics have really come into their own at this day. So let's take a look at how we can define infographics. And for me, there's three areas you can define an infographic. First is fundamentally by asking, what is an infographic at its most basic level? And next, notionally, what is an infographic on a conceptual level? And finally, instructionally, what skills do infographics teach? So my responses are that fundamentally, infographics are merely information and graphics combined. It's really that simple. And then, notionally speaking, infographics are data and concept visualization. That is the larger conceptual piece of what an infographic is about. It can be data and concept or just concepts, but usually data and concepts together, visualized for the audience. And finally, instructionally, using and creating infographics will employ information, visual, and digital literacies. So using infographics and instruction really spans a wide level of the continuum of different types of literacies. So next we can ask ourselves, what are some ways that we can identify an infographic or criteria that makes an infographic? Well, again, going back to that notion of data and or concept visualization. Very powerful to present data and concepts in visual format. And then what would you add to that? Maybe the use of text, graphs, graphics, tables, images, backgrounds. So when you're looking at what makes an infographic, it's far more than just an image. It is a compilation of images and text. And I would also argue in an academic sense, it's important that an infographic includes references. Now the example here on the screen, an infographic emphasizing the value of infographics for conveying and accelerating information decisioning, it is really powerful even though it doesn't actually use any references. It of course is an infographic, but maybe not one that we might consider at an academic level. So if you were creating a rubric or a set of criteria for evaluating infographics, here's my advice. You could go along these lines in terms of criteria. The infographic needs to have a point, at least one major point. Not too many points, but one. It needs to be data-driven. It should include references, if it's academic in nature, and have high-impact visuals to really grab the audience's attention. And using high contrast colors is advised for readability, and consistent colors as well, so as not to make the infographic too busy and difficult to follow. And finally, it should be accessible, and that whatever images, clip art, graphics that you decide to use, graphs, whatever, you also include some brief descriptions. Again, referring to this Y Infographics example on the screen now, you can see there's just small amounts of text to emphasize the points of how powerful it is to use infographics as an alternative way to present conceptual ideas to accelerate decision making versus what's presented on the opposite side for traditional, which is the document or the email, the purely text way to convey information. So let's visit a little bit more on the topic of why are infographics so powerful. Well, in terms of an instructional technique, I think McCandless here in his 2010 TED Talk on the beauty of data visualization really says it so eloquently. We're going to take a moment now to listen to McCandless speak about how he created this infographic about the political spectrum of left and right, and how it encouraged his critical thinking about concepts, ideas, and his own worldviews. So let's take a moment to listen to McCandless speak on this topic.
But it kind of can go beyond data and it can go beyond numbers. And I like to apply information visualization to ideas and concepts. This is a visualization of the political spectrum, an attempt for me to try and understand how it works and how the ideas percolate down from government into society and culture, into families, into individuals, into their beliefs, and then back round again in a cycle. What I love about this image is it's made up of concepts that explores our worldviews, and it helps us, it's helped me anyway, to see what others think and to see where they're coming from. And it feels just incredibly cool to do that. And what was most exciting for me designing this was that when I was designing this image, I desperately wanted this side, the left side, to be better than the right side, being a kind of journalist, left-leaning person. But I couldn't, because I would have created a lopsided, biased diagram. So in order to really create a full image, I had to honor the perspectives on the right-hand side, and at the same time kind of uncomfortably recognize how many of those qualities were actually in me, which is very, very annoying and uncomfortable. But not too uncomfortable, because there's something unthreatening about seeing a political perspective versus being told or forced to listen to one. It's actually, you're capable of holding conflicting viewpoints joyously when you can see them. It's even fun to engage with them because it's visual. So that's what's exciting for me, seeing how data can change my perspective and change my mind midstream. Beautiful, lovely data.
Very powerful, I think. Hopefully you grasp there that McCandless really, for himself, just as your students might in creating infographics, or even yourself, was forced to think through things in a critical way in order to have a balanced infographic. And that really cannot be emphasized enough, the power of infographics to encourage deep thinking. So in terms of instructional strategies, a few quick ideas here. Flyers are really a great way to use infographics and have your students create infographics. Suppose they need to create an advertisement for a marketing class, or maybe a one-page flyer to distribute to stakeholders in a school environment if they're teacher educators. It goes on in terms of the value of creating a one-page flyer. The example here on the screen is an advertisement for a water purifier discussing the intricacies of bottled water. Very powerful, much more powerful than what might be presented in a white paper, a 10-page text document. And here you can also see there's a use for infographics in presenting research results. Any level of research, very basic research by your students or very complex research, or even your own. This replaces the abstract in the research article in some sense. It provides you a visual means to summarize the findings of research or the research process itself. So, getting creative with your instructional ideas with infographics, rather than have students write a 5-page summary, perhaps they create an informational graphic to convey their research findings. And then next, as poster sessions, we often have students create PowerPoint or other presentations in Prezi or Google Slides, and that's fine. Those are very powerful. But why not have students practice with professional conference poster session creation using infographics, or even just creating one-page posters as infographics as an alternative to the standard PowerPoint. Whatever instructional strategy you go with for your learners, keep in mind that these infographics as a technique are going to encourage higher level thinking skills. Students will be creating, they'll be aggregating, they'll be visualizing, they'll be evaluating, and they'll be synthesizing information. And here's a mnemonic device for you, caves. And that goes back to the title of today's session. Learners are actively involved in caves, these various areas of higher level cognitive skills. And so as you're writing outcomes for lessons that involve infographics, or you're conveying to others what cognitive skills you used as you created your own infographics, you can remember that you're at the higher level of the cognitive taxonomies with these higher level thinking skills. All right, moving on, we'll take a look at how you can use existing infographics. Lots of websites available. One I really like from Ross, Infographic Designs, Overview, Examples, and Best Practices, emphasizes the history of infographics and their digital form, gives several examples of infographics, and design tips for infographics as well. Another website that's really rich in information is from Schrock, titled Infographics as Creative Assessment, and again emphasizing that this is an alternative form of assessment that you can use as an instructional strategy. On Schrock's website you'll find resources, examples, and tools. But even more powerful on the World Wide Web, there are two websites I want to emphasize for you. One is Google Images as a search engine for existing infographics, and the next is Infographic Add. Let's take a look at these websites now where I can give you an overview of some of the things you can find there for existing infographics. Here we are looking at the Infographic Add website, and again, this is a very rich resource for existing infographics. There's a menu here near the top of the page where you can investigate various categories, looking at things specifically for history or for the humanities, and even for STEM categories. And these are really great, again, to use with your students in announcements as attention grabbers for the week, or as supplements in discussions, or even in grading feedback if perhaps that relates to a topic of an assignment that a student has submitted. There's really an infinite number of ways that you could use infographics to extend your students' learning and to excite them about learning that is to occur. Also, Google Images, again, at images.google.com, you can search for specific topics for infographics by typing the word infographic and a specific category for search. Here, I'm just using research as an example. You can see there are numerous search results, many existing infographics to be found. We can, of course, change this keyword here to something like physics, and boom, there you go. Lots and lots to choose from. Lots of existing infographics out there, folks, and when you find these, you can use them for inspiration for your own original creations, and then again, by citing them and embedding them within your courses, additional materials, or even as part of curriculum if you're designing courses. These are really, really rich ways to convey information visually to learners, and I encourage you to get excited about the wealth of resources already available for infographics, and again, to use them as inspiration for creating your own. Okay, so now you've seen some places to find existing infographics, but what if you want to create your own? Well, rest assured there are plenty of tools out there, web-based, to create infographics that are pretty much point and click, drop and drag, very simple to use. A couple of these that I like are Easily, Infogram, and Visme. Visme in particular has great social media integration. All of these would be considered third-party software. They might not be entirely ADA compliant and accessible, and they will require learners to sign up with the website to use it as well as yourself. So if you're not willing to go down that road, maybe you're not teaching a technology-focused course, such an educational technology course, maybe you're working in a history course or philosophy course, or maybe in a business course where you're not really interested in having your students learn yet another Web 2.0 tool. Well, that's fine, because guess what? There are numerous ways they can create infographics using very familiar technologies. And here's the beauty of the common technologies, such as Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, or the web-based Google Drive suite with Docs and Google Slides. And that's that students are familiar with these technologies, as no doubt you are. And the beauty of using common technologies and not boggling students down in the complexities of these newfangled web-based tools is that you reduce the anxiety factor for students. If you let students know, hey, you're going to create an infographic, and you give them some just-in-time support on what an infographic should be, going back to those criteria that we discussed for what an infographic might include, and maybe you show them some examples of excellent infographics to use as their models, then what? You need to advise them on what tool to use. I strongly recommend that you send them to familiar technologies, such as Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. In PowerPoint and Word, you can change the size of the page or the slide to an 8.5 by 11 to a printable sheet of paper. And you can have students get really creative with the infographics using the built-in design tools. These can include clip art, line drawings, graphs, tables, you could just numerous things. And of course you can bring in charts and tables from Microsoft Excel or from Google Sheets as well. You can use these combinations of very familiar office technologies for your students. And again, it's not that the web-based programs are not encouraged for use. It's just simply that being third-party software with terms of service use and various user agreements, you might not want to go there, and that's fine. Keep in mind, your students are very likely going to have access to these common Microsoft Office as well as a Google suite of production software. So here's an example to show you how easy it is to create an infographic. An example citation job aid created by Michelle Leckerkirk over in the Writing Center. She used PowerPoint, and this is simply a decision infographic. When do you cite? And it's very highly graphical, and I hope you will agree that sending this to learners as an attachment, as feedback to an assignment, embedded in an announcement through email, embedded in a discussion post, however, and saying, hey, here's a job aid for you on when do you cite, use this as a reference, students are much more likely to go to this graphic as a job aid, as an infographic, than they are to go to a series of text instructions about when to cite. So again, breaking down very complex or seemingly complex procedures into graphical format can be very powerful. And again, I want to thank Michelle for sharing this example with me for use in today's session. That pretty much wraps it up, folks. You've hopefully now had the opportunity to achieve these 6 learning outcomes. And regarding number 6, the planning of use of familiar technologies, you're very excited at this point, I hope, to go and create your own infographics, to explore existing infographics that are out there, and start thinking about how you can have students in your classes start creating infographics as primary or alternative assessments. Again, thank you for viewing this discovery session presented for the Ashford University Teaching and Learning Conference. On the screen here you can see my contact information, lisa.johnson@ashford.edu. You can reach me there, or my personal email, lisajohnsonphd@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter @CuriousMind, or via the website reflectivelearning.net. 2 suggested citations there on the screen if you're citing the video file or the weblog post where this video file is embedded. And finally, I'm licensed this under Creative Commons. Please give attribution if you decide to use this or to adapt it for non-commercial preferably, and share alike. I would love to see the infographics you create, or if you take this presentation today and repurpose it for your own needs and expand upon it, please share back. I'd love to see what you're creating and learn from and with you going forward. Again, I'm Lisa Johnson. Thank you again for your attention. I hope this has been useful to you. Please reach out if I can be of assistance.